As the economic recovery continues, there is one particular area that has recovered dramatically, both locally and nationally. The housing market was one of the hardest hit during the recession of 2008 and 2009 and is now running very, very strong. And this is good news because for 60% of consumers, our home is our largest asset. U.S. Bank Wealth Management Senior Equity Strategist Jim Russell joins Business Courier editor Rob Dahlmeyer in the studio now for this week's U.S. Economic Bank 360 with more on the positive housing trend.
Peg, thanks. And Jim, question for you real quick. She mentioned the recession. The housing bubble actually burst before the recession, so you could argue that the housing bubble helped cause the recession. But why is housing so important to the economy?
Well, I think Peg mentioned it in the intro, Rob, and that is for 60% of Americans, approximately 60%, their home is their largest asset. When that asset goes up in value, and most people don't view a home as an investment per se, they're more likely to spend a little bit. The academic work would indicate that maybe 3 to 5 cents of every dollar of appreciation of home value flows into the economy. You know, this is really key because consumers own homes, not businesses, but consumers. And consumers account for 70% of the economy here in the United States. So if the consumer feels good, that's a very good thing. As mentioned a minute ago, a wealthier consumer means that perhaps things flow through to the economy, Procter & Gamble products get bought, etc.
So the housing market here nationally over the last 5, 6, 7 years has been fairly flat, which most of us had never seen before.
Right.
But what you're seeing now is that that's changing.
It is changing. Over time, the housing market nationally has appreciated about 4 to 5% on an annual basis. Now, more recently, of course, we've come off of major lows, and it looks like that the trends in housing prices, both nationally and in Cincinnati, really are on the rise here. Well, we get a series of statistics called the Case-Shiller data, and what you see here is the Case-Shiller data demonstrated really over the last several years, and you can see the dramatic fall off, you can see the dramatic increase. Interestingly, Cincinnati is up in the most latest data almost 10% on a year-over-year basis. So very strong numbers. Nationally, the number is right under 13%. Now, if you look closely at this graph, you can see that housing affordability is maybe off its peak. Housing affordability is really a combination of home prices, mortgage rates, of course, and consumer incomes. Now, the major reason why it's not at its peak is that housing prices have gone up. They've gone up 10, 11, 12% over the last 2 or 3 years in a row. We do think that that rate of appreciation perhaps is starting to ebb just a little bit, probably see a little bit of a downward type of progression in the rate of change.
Right.
But housing prices, we feel, will continue to appreciate nationally and locally as well.
Yeah, I was going to say locally. Any parts of town that seem to be hotter than others?
Yeah, there's some very good news in particular neighborhoods, and we've got a couple of those listed for our viewers. Wyoming, Loveland, Madeira, Fort Thomas. There are other neighborhoods also, Rob, that have done really well in terms of just really recovering nicely on the bounce, and certainly some neighborhoods a little stronger than others, but I will tell you that there's been a lot of great activity, a lot of really happy people who have either sold their homes and have decided to do something else, or maybe a little bit less happy news for the first-time home buyer, which sees perhaps that they're maybe 2 years late to the party.
They missed out a tiny bit. I live in Loveland, so I'm happy to see the percentage growth there, but my neighborhood's filled with empty nesters who I'm sure, quite sure, had planned to leave 5, 6 years ago.
Right.
But the housing prices went down, so they sort of stuck themselves there, and literally the word stuck, I think, is the whole term. So if things could be loosened up, even if prices are rising, that's great for everybody.
It is. You know, in fact, job mobility was stuck and stagnant during that period for the very reason you cite.
Jim, thank you so much.
Thank you.